what we're going to do today is go over the outline that's on your screen, talking about what onboarding is, what the goals are of onboarding, some suggestions on what to do in the first day when you bring on your new apprentice, what to do over the first few weeks, some thoughts about training methods, keys to success, and then our DGA masters will come on and give some of their own personal examples of how they bring a new apprentice onto their farms. So you may be wondering about this term onboarding. It's something that I wasn't familiar with before I started working with DGA. This is a term that's used in business, and it's a standard process that helps a new employee understand how to be successful in their job. And how their work contributes to the overall business. So it's kind of more than an orientation of how to do the job. It's an orientation on kind of the bigger picture of what your farm is up to, what your how you manage your farm. It's introducing people to the team they're going to be working with, giving them an understanding of your farming philosophy and where they fit in it. So it's kind of a broader conceptual term that goes beyond just teaching them how to do stuff the first day. So this is one of our tip sheets that we put together, and you can find this on the DGA website. If you go on the left side of the website, there's a tab for master resources, and it's one of a number of little tip sheets we put together, and we'll be going through what's in this one today. Okay, so I think the first important theme here is to avoid information overload. And if you think about if you've worked off the farm before, think about what your first day on a new job was like, and try to put yourself in the apprentice's shoes, and the notion that all of this is new to them, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. So start with really general information and then move gradually toward more specific tasks, and by all means encourage them to ask questions and let them know that they're free to ask questions about anything that they have some concerns about or they don't understand. There's no such thing as a dumb question. So on the first day, what do you do on the first day? Suggestion would be to start with a tour of your farm. You may have already given them a tour when they interviewed with you, but this is a way of reinforcing that and of going over maybe in a little bit more depth. Think about giving them a map of the farm and identifying where the feed shed is, and where the free stall is, and where the milking parlor is, so they can kind of help themselves get oriented. A notebook and a pen so they can take some notes. And then if you have one, this would be a good time to give them an employee handbook. And we know a lot of our masters may not have an employee handbook. So on the right-hand side of your screen, this is another one of those tip sheets that actually goes through and helps to put together a handbook if you'd like to have one for your apprentice or other employees. So it has a series of what you might want to include in an employee handbook. It doesn't have to be long, it could just be a couple of pages, but something for your apprentice to reference. The first day, you might also want to go over their employment contract. Some of you may not have an employment contract, so we did put together a template for you to use, which is also on the website. And this is, it's important because it helps you kind of talk through all of the details of some of the things that you probably talked to them about when you hired them, compensation package and work schedule, but it kind of helps reinforce those things, something for them to reference if they ever have a question. Okay, so start with a tour. In addition to introducing them to your family and other employees and showing them around the farm, these people might be new to your local community. They might have moved in from somewhere else. Consider giving them a tour of town and show them where the grocery stores are, show them where the public library is, county government offices where they may need to do business, and other places where you do business. You know, introduce them to the local feed mill, your veterinarian, and things like that. I'll kind of give them an orientation to the broader community where they're going to be working. Next, you might want to, or actually you definitely want to talk to them about safety. This should be part of the initial tour, and it should be, it's also actually a requirement of formal apprenticeship that all masters provide their apprentices a safety training of some sort. It doesn't have to be formal or real comprehensive or anything, but give them an idea of what are some of the safety hazards on your farms, how to avoid them. And this tip sheet on the left here kind of goes through some of the things that you might want to talk to them about during that safety orientation. And then especially if they haven't worked with livestock before, consider giving them a little bit of special training in working with livestock before they ever have to push cattle up into the milking parlor or do anything else around your cattle. And this tip sheet on the right can kind of help guide that process. Okay, so that's in the first couple of days, and that already seems like a lot. So like I said, take it slow, and repetition is good. Make sure people understand and ask questions if they have any. So in the first week or so, think about or plan to work side by side with your apprentice, and just kind of be there even if they look like they know what they're doing and they're getting into a good habit and learning things quickly. Make sure you're close by. Focus on the important tasks, and especially those that they'll be doing routinely, and make sure they get those down. If you've got several different categories of work on the farm, start rotating them through, you know, feed mixing versus milking, and make sure they start getting the kind of a feel for the bigger overall management of the operation. It's important because these are, they're not just farm labor, they're people who are wanting to learn how to manage a farm. So looking at those big categories of work and starting to think about how they integrate and how they're managed together is an important part of their learning. And then make sure you focus not only on how to do things, but on why. And that's another piece of this learning how to be a manager and gaining those management skills. So think about not only explaining and demonstrating, ask if they have questions, let them try, correct them if necessary, and then let them why they're doing it. So this table talks a little bit about how people learn and how they remember, and this is something that a lot of trainers kind of struggle with, is that when we tell somebody and show somebody something, we assume that they know it, and they know it as well as we do. But really, this isn't necessarily the case, and most people need to have things reinforced, you know, 3 to 5 times before it actually becomes committed to memory and they know it well. And the researchers point out that we retain things differently depending on how they're learned and how they're experienced. So this chart shows that, you know, we retain about 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, then if you combine some of those different reinforcing methods of absorbing information, 50% of what we see and hear, writing things down actually helps you commit things to memory much better than almost anything else. And then finally, we retain not 100%, but 90% of what we learn if we practice it ourselves and have to explain it to someone else. So this is kind of the key to apprenticeship, why apprenticeship is so effective, a method of learning. By kind of combining these different learning methods, we can reinforce and strengthen what the apprentice takes away. So in addition to having the physical work and doing the task, have them teach it or explain it to someone else. Have them maybe do a log or do some kind of a journal, so they're actually writing down some of the things that they've learned. And then consider providing written resources that can help reinforce what they're learning in their on the farm. So those are some different methods you can use to combine to make the training more effective. Okay, and then another valuable tool is having written standard operating procedures. A lot of larger farms have these. If you've got existing employees, you have a written, most people have written standard operating procedures so everyone can see how to do the milking procedure, what the steps are, how to mix feed, that sort of thing. So if you don't have those, can consider developing them before your apprentice starts, or actually having your apprentice create some standard operating procedures for you would be a good task for them and a good learning experience for them. So in general, the guidelines for training include gradually introducing new tasks as they master the first ones. Then when they're proficient in some tasks, think about transferring responsibility, even if it's a small task, saying, you're responsible for this. So it's not only just getting the work done, but scheduling it and planning it and fitting it into the schedule. And a lot of that can help them become better managers and encourage more initiative and independence thinking. It's very reinforcing to have your employer say, you've got this down, I'm going to give this to you as your responsibility. So that's a big piece of the apprenticeship process. Then I also want to just talk a little bit about going forward, over the course of the apprenticeship and how you're going to introduce new subjects and bring them through the training guidelines that you see here on the right. And just encourage you to think about the starting early on in the apprenticeship with this individual education plan, which is something that your education coordinator will work with you on, and think through the process of what you're going to focus on at different times of the year during the first year and the second year. So if your apprentice is starting in the spring, well, calving is something that you're probably going to focus on. Later in the summer, you're going to want to hit all of the competencies in the pasture management section of the training guidelines. So kind of sit down and plan out how you're going to go through the 2 years at the very beginning, so you can fit all of the training in that you need to do. Okay, so a few keys to our presenters or our panelists. Good communication is probably the most important factor in the success of an apprenticeship, and we see this across all of our states and all of our masters and apprentices. Those that develop a good rapport and good communication early on can get through a lot of the little struggles and challenges that might come along. As I mentioned before, be willing to transfer responsibility for tasks when the apprentice is ready. This is how they learn management skills. And then remember that your apprentice is there to learn. So being patient and taking the time to teach, and taking some pride in your skills and what you have to offer them, and make sure you take time to share that with your apprentice along the way. So with that, that kind of covers the generalities of onboarding and getting your apprentice started in the first cut over all freight crews in eastern and southern Wisconsin. He's a retired dairy farmer and has hired a few people over the years, and he's got some tips for you as well. And then we'll talk to Ben Jensen and Matt DeGrandpré at Wolfsnick Center, and they can tell us a little bit about their unique education farm where they work. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll go back to this format and turn it over to Alfred.
Yeah.
Go right ahead, Alfred.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, just to my background, as Laura says, I work as an education coordinator for DGA in eastern and southern Wisconsin. But maybe more importantly today, until 4 years ago, I operated a 400-acre dairy, milking 140 cows in a 16-unit swingover parlor. And training young people has always been a big part of our mission, because I didn't grow up on a dairy farm, and and thanks to very patient mentors I had when I learned farming, I felt that I really needed to give back. And so from the get-go, we always had interns and apprentices and later on employees on our farm. So we did a lot of onboarding, and we didn't do it always right, because we didn't have all that neat information that Laura just presented, but we learned a few things over the years. And just in addition to what Laura said, there is a couple things I want to point out that we felt was really important. Just consider how nervous a new candidate is, that or a new employee is that comes to your farm. They step on foreign turf, so to speak. You are on your familiar turf. They're way more nervous and anxious than you are. And I think the first day or a couple days should be really to get them settled and get them comfortable. And that's where touring the farm, introducing them to their co-workers and to your family becomes so important. And especially if they come from further away. Because in a certain way, when they're from further away, you become a little bit responsible also for their social environment, at least initially, to get them settled. But what we found really important is right from the get-go to lay down some house rules. And I'm thinking of a master that I had, who had an apprentice who listened to his phone, to music, while he was milking with earbuds in. And he let it slide in the beginning, and then a few weeks in, he felt it would be really awkward to do something about it and to change this. So if you do some house rules right from the beginning about, for example, music in the parlor, that seems to be a big one where people differ. Some people play music while the cows are being milked. Some people play music only during parlor cleanup. Those would be important things to clear right from the beginning. Phone usage is another big one. Under what circumstances are they allowed to use their phone while they're working? Then also be really clear about the work schedule, what you expect from them, what time they should show up, ready to work, how many hours, how they should keep track of their hours if they paid hourly, and what day would be their payday. Laura asked me to talk more specifically about how you teach some of the first beginning tasks. And on most dairy farms, a repetitive task that you want your apprentice to learn would be the milking procedure. Now think about all the steps that you take to get your parlor milk house ready for milking. There is probably at least several dozen little steps that you do and movements that you do and switches you flip. Just encourage your apprentice, tell him or her they don't have to worry about memorizing everything they see on that very first day when they join you for milking. But rather observe the flow of things and the flow of how you get things ready to milk. And then with the actual milking, it would help to have first a meeting with them, even outside milking times, about a prepping routine in your milking parlor, how you prep cows. And sometimes those prepping routines might divert from what standard operating procedures or industry standard. And it would be good to explain all that. What is the industry standard, how you do it on your farm, and why you do it differently, and what all the reasons are behind all the steps that you take. So for example, why you prep an udder, not only to avoid contamination of the udder or the milk, but also to stimulate oxytocin letdown and so forth. And then in the parlor, in the beginning, what I usually started with was to teach them how to properly dip a cow and make sure that there's good coverage on the teat and everything that's important to you about them doing a really good job dipping cows. Because that seems like an easy task. And while they're doing this, they can observe what else is all going on in the milking parlor during milking, and they get a feeling for the flow. Then you have done this a couple times with them, then you can gradually introduce another task, like prepping the udder, for example. The point is not to overwhelm them with too many details right away from the beginning, but take several milkings or maybe even several days to teach them the full routine. And how long this will take, you might have to adjust depending on how fast your apprentice is learning. Another example would be teaching how to drive a tractor. Now, when you do this, you don't want to just sit them down in the tractor and have an implement right away behind the tractor, but first sit down in the tractor with them, explain to them how the tractor operates, how it works. Have them sit in the driver's seat, try out to drive the tractor while you're sitting there, and then eventually have them practice in a safe space like a big paddock or a big yard without any obstacles. They're really just trying to operate the tractor itself. And I found it important in those situations to just walk away. Before I walk away, I say, any questions at this point? No questions? Okay. I walk away, come back after a certain while and ask, how did it go? And did any questions surface? So that seems to be a way of how to gradually bring somebody in and teach them specific tasks. But then there are some, maybe I should call them softer skills that I found important and that you have to repeat over and over again. A really big one is the skill of observation. I find many young people today have a very poor observational skills. And I really try to practice the skill of observation with them. Like when we got the cows, I said, do you notice anything in this paddock? Maybe it was grazed, overgrazed, or there was too much residual. So I try to tune them into these observations. Or do you see anything in the locomotion of this particular cow? In general, I said the moment you step onto the farm, you should have like a radar going. All your senses should be engaged. You smell smoke. Is there maybe a fire somewhere? Do you hear any unusual noises? And that's where the earbuds in the parlor come in. How can you hear an air leak in the parlor if you're listening with earbuds in your ear to music? So to engage all the senses and train this observational skill, I thought was a big one. The other one is I try to teach them over time to have the least negative impact while doing the job. So what I mean by that is try to get the task accomplished with the least negative impact on soil, plants, animals, machinery, and themselves. So yeah, that's what I had. I don't want to overwhelm you with too many details, since this is an onboarding discussion, and I'm happy to later on answer some questions.